A fight between Jake Paul and Anthony Joshua sounds crazy, almost unreal, like something pulled straight out of a fantasy matchup generator. But what if it actually happened? A YouTuber turned boxer stepping into the ring against a former heavyweight world champion. And while at first glance it feels like a complete mismatch, the real story goes much deeper than that. Because this isn't just about who hits harder or who looks stronger. It's about levels, the kind of levels that only exist in boxing, where years of experience, discipline, and high-pressure fights separate good fighters from truly elite ones. Jake Paul, whether people support him or criticize him, has undeniably changed the landscape of modern boxing by turning social media influence into real pay-per-view success. Going from YouTube videos to headlining major boxing events, knocking out former MMA champions, drawing millions of viewers, and building a brand that most traditional fighters could only dream of. And that alone is impressive. But the truth that often gets ignored is that Jake Paul is still in the early stages of his boxing journey. He started late compared to most professionals. He didn't go through a long amateur career filled with hundreds of fights. He didn't spend years fighting in small venues for low pay, learning the craft step by step. Instead, his rise has been fast-tracked, accelerated by fame and smart promotion. And while that path has worked for him financially and commercially, it also creates a massive gap when compared to someone like Anthony Joshua, who represents the complete opposite path in boxing. Joshua is not just a boxer. He is a product of years of structured development, an Olympic gold medalist who reached the pinnacle of amateur boxing before transitioning into the professional ranks, where he went on to become a multiple-time heavyweight champion, facing some of the toughest fighters in the world. Experiencing victories, defeats, knockdowns, comebacks, and everything in between. And that kind of journey builds something far more valuable than hype. It builds experience, composure, and a deep understanding of the sport that cannot be rushed or skipped. When you compare the two, you're not just comparing skill sets, you're comparing entire careers, entire paths. And that's where the concept of levels becomes clear. Because in boxing, levels are everything. They determine how you react under pressure, how you adjust mid-fight, how you handle adversity, and most importantly, how you survive when things go wrong. If Jake Paul and Anthony Joshua were to actually step into the ring together, the differences would likely become visible almost immediately, not necessarily in the first punch, but in the small details, the footwork, the timing, the distance control, the ability to read an opponent's movements and anticipate their next action. Jake might enter the fight confident, using his jab, trying to maintain distance, looking for opportunities to land clean shots, and for a brief moment, it might even look competitive. But as the seconds pass, Joshua would begin to settle in, staying calm, composed, measuring Jake's rhythm, understanding his patterns, and slowly taking control of the fight without rushing. Because that's what experienced fighters do. They don't panic. They don't waste energy. They wait for the right moment. Then comes the shift. The moment where the fight starts to change, Joshua begins to apply pressure, cutting off the ring, reducing Jake's space, forcing him into positions he's not comfortable in. And this is where the gap in experience starts to show. Because fighting under pressure against an elite heavyweight is completely different from anything Jake has faced before. Every movement becomes more stressful, every decision carries more risk, and every mistake becomes more dangerous. Jake might start hesitating, overthinking his shots, becoming cautious because he knows that one clean punch from Joshua could end the fight instantly. And that awareness alone can change how a fighter performs, slowing them down, making them less aggressive, less confident. Then eventually, it happens. A clean shot lands. Maybe a sharp jab followed by a powerful right hand. And in that moment, Jake feels the difference. Real heavyweight power. Not just strength, but precision, timing, and impact combined. Something that can't be fully understood until you experience it. And from that point forward, the fight becomes a test of survival rather than competition. Jake might try to move, to avoid damage, to recover, but Joshua, sensing the opportunity, would likely increase the pressure, stepping forward, throwing combinations, controlling the pace. And not allowing Jake to reset or regain control. The referee might step in, or Jake might go down, and the fight would end in a way that reinforces the reality of the situation. Not as a disrespect to Jake Paul, but as a reflection of the level Anthony Joshua operates on. Because this isn't about undermining Jake's achievements. What he has done is genuinely impressive. He entered a sport where most people dedicate their entire lives just to reach a fraction of the success he has achieved. And he managed to build a career, make money, and attract global attention in a relatively short time. But fighting someone like Joshua is not just another step up. It's a completely different challenge, a leap across a gap that cannot be bridged overnight. For Jake, the smarter path is continued growth, taking fights that gradually increase in difficulty, gaining more experience, improving his skills, and building his boxing IQ over time, because rushing into a fight against an elite heavyweight could be damaging not just physically, but also for his career momentum. While for Anthony Joshua, his focus remains on top-level competition, legacy fights, world titles, and opponents who are on his level, fighters like Tyson Fury, where the stakes are not just about entertainment, but about history and greatness. In the end, Jake Paul versus Anthony Joshua is a fascinating idea, a fight that would generate massive attention, break the internet, and bring in huge pay-per-view numbers. But when you strip away the hype and look at the reality, boxing has a way of exposing the truth. It doesn't matter how big the name is or how strong the promotion is. Inside the ring, only skill, experience, and execution matter. And that's why the answer to whether Jake Paul could beat Anthony Joshua right now is simple. Not based on opinion, but based on levels, and those levels are what define boxing, making it one of the most unforgiving sports in the world, where one mistake, one punch, and one moment can change everything. And that is the harsh reality.